Before I leave the house, I always wind my pocket watch 3 times. Once for the life I created, once for my grandfather, and once for the life I lost. Like him, it makes a crisp, almost unyielding sound every time it snaps softly in my palm. The glass face is scratched at the corners, and the brass is now tarnished and heated from decades of contact. Perhaps that is why I adore it, even though it no longer keeps time well. It doesn't hurry, but it remembers. As usual, I tucked it inside the small pocket inside my coat that morning. After that, I put on my clothes, stepped out into the cold, and drove the 34 minutes to a life I believed to be mine. That weekend, I wasn't meant to be in town. The weekend following my birthday, Caleb and I had decided to take a road trip to Lake Geneva together, just the two of us. Exactly like we had done when we first got married. A peaceful cabin, free from digital distractions, emails, and investors. We had worked together for 7 years to build the boutique furniture company, Larch and Pine, and I had blocked the entire event out of my schedule. 7 years of showroom fantasies, handmade branding, softwood splinters, and late nights. However, Caleb said there was an impromptu meeting with a city developer the morning before we left. He had stated that we were being considered for the makeover of City Hall. Everything could change because of this. I had given a nod. I was accustomed to delaying things. I drove out to Madison by myself to deliver a prototype chair to the carpentry lab instead of Geneva. The item required some little sanding on the rear slat, and we had committed it to a museum curator for a minimalist exhibit. I had the option of sending someone else. However, a part of me said, go, the part that kept rewinding itself like that uncooperative pocket watch. I also paid attention. That's how at 1:47 p.m. on a Saturday I happened to pass our office building. With the exception of Caleb's black electric sedan and another red car with out-of-state license plates, the parking lot was largely deserted. I was unaware of it. If I hadn't noticed the person in the driver's seat, I wouldn't have hesitated. Olivia was the one, my co-founder, our companion. She was adjusting her lipstick and tilting down the sun visor. She wore that striking scarlet for evenings out, not the muted shade she wore to meetings. I felt my gut tighten. Even before she exited the vehicle, she was giggling over something. I walked back after parking a block away. Not because I had any suspicions, since I was previously aware. In order to showcase our showroom, Larch and Pine's headquarters had tall glass windows in front. They showed me something very different that day. Olivia held a stemless wineglass next to the walnut conference table. Her blouse was slightly unbuttoned, but not in a professional way. Across from her, Caleb was pouring another glass from a bottle that I knew, the Barolo we purchased during our most recent anniversary celebration in Sonoma. We stated that we would save it for a milestone. I put my hand to my coat's pocket watch. It failed to tick. Or perhaps it did, but the weight in my chest muffled the sound. I didn't just walk right in. I did not make a call. As I watched them toast with what used to be love, I stood there feeling like the ghost of my own life. They shared a kiss. Not a kiss, for the first time, a simple one. Known, practiced. I turned at that point and started to walk back to my car. I refrained from crying. I took off my coat, wound the watch 3 times, and drove home. After that, I waited while sitting quietly. Caleb texted in the evening. Hey, work took a long time, just crashing in the city at the guest suite. We'll celebrate shortly, so happy belatedly once more. I adore you. He made no reference to the wine or Olivia, or the lipstick that hours before I knew he would taste. That falsehood, which was airy and far away, hit harder than if he had admitted it. It indicated that he had already accepted the betrayal as usual. It was filed under logistics, reducing me to an obsolete resource. I didn't get any sleep that night. We constructed a house together, and I sat at the dining table and created a list of what I still had not, of what I had lost. The actions, the copyrights, the patents for designs. The actual buildings underneath the facade that Caleb and Olivia's flawless showroom grins had produced. They believed me to be the heart. They neglected that I was the backbone as well. My grandmother told the story behind the pocket watch, which was the difference. My grandfather had given it to me. I questioned her why Grandpa's watch didn't have a battery like other watches when I was 8 years old. Because some things aren't meant to run unless you remember to care for them. She had added with a smile. I assumed she was referring to the watch at the moment. I was unaware that she was referring to people. Every Sunday morning, I used to watch her polish it, her fingers moving slowly and respectfully over the brass's curve. Next to a pile of recipe cards and a letter that I never saw her read, she would gently wind it, snap it shut, and slide it into the top drawer of her vanity. She never wound it again after Grandpa's death. It had seen enough time, she remarked. She bequeathed it to me, not my father or my uncles, when she passed away. Me. Because when I was a girl, I sat with her in the kitchen and asked her questions that made her laugh when she didn't have much to laugh at. She once told me, "You listen with your whole face. That's rarer than you know." So I paid attention, particularly right now. The morning after I saw Caleb with Olivia, I wondered about her. I sat by the kitchen window watching the street gradually come to life and poured myself coffee into the cup that still bore our emblem, which is L&P engraved into a tree ring design. I kept it a secret. Not quite yet. Retaliation was not my first instinct. It was dishonorable. That old bone-deep shame that makes women question what they missed, what they didn't become, and what tenderness they withheld for too long or gave too freely. I went down memory lane. Caleb carried me through the doors of the showroom the first day we opened, as if we were newlyweds. How Olivia had brought us little cupcakes and balloons. We had a friendship, or I believed we were. 3 years ago during a product launch, Olivia drank a few too many glasses of champagne and sobbed in our guest room about how lonely she was. I recalled that night. She was nestled in by me. I had given her a back rub. How foolish I had been, not because I had faith in her, but because I thought my allegiance served as a protection. It wasn't. 2 nights later, Caleb came home as if nothing had occurred. He was humming some unmemorable pop song as I watched him unload takeout from the nearby eatery. I got him the same cozy blue button-down shirt for Christmas last year, and he wore it. "How did the city fare?" I asked fairly. He hesitated for a moment, just long enough to glance at me. "Producible," he declared. "I believe we will win the bid." He then gave me a box of pad thai and kissed my temple. That's when I realized it was more than simply betrayal. I was getting wiped out. He didn't even try to lie in an original way. The show wasn't it for me. I waited until he was sleeping next to me that night, arms wrapped around the pillow rather than me, and then I crept into the study. I started looking at financial reports after opening our corporate cloud folder. I was the design lead. Spreadsheets were not my area of expertise. However, I had examined every purchase and signed every invoice. I was well versed in our growth forecasts and profitability. The first inconsistency was quickly discovered. We abruptly started paying a supplier we had stopped doing business with 2 years prior. The transaction IDs were examined by me. They were connected to Caleb's business card. The sums were small, barely above the threshold for solo cost clearance, but they totaled up over 6 months. I looked further. Inconspicuously, Olivia's consultancy fees had increased, tripled after that. She had filed a PDF the previous quarter, which I examined. It was signed by both of them and contained an ambiguous line item titled Strategy Consulting for Legacy Phase. The legacy phase did not exist. Not one I was aware of anyway. I retrieved the legal file. It was there. My name was not on a draft document called Buyout Path Internal Stake Transfer. My 49% shareholding was highlighted in red. They intended to discredit me in my own business. How long I sat there is a mystery to me. The light eventually rose and the birds began to sing as if it were any other Sunday. Caleb had not woken up. Through the bedroom's cracked door, I gazed at him, contented, serene, dreaming, in a bed we jointly selected in a home we constructed brick by brick. All of a sudden, I was no longer angry. I was explicit. He wasn't deserving of anger. He wasn't even deserving of heartache. Silence was due to him. As well as planning, I made a secure email before our wedding, when I still had my maiden name, and didn't imagine I'd ever need to defend myself from the guy who asked me to marry him barefoot in the mountains. I copied the documents, encrypted them, and sent them to the email address I hadn't used in years. My grandfather used to tell me while we were playing chess, "People show you who they are by what they do when no one is watching." This notion came to me. However, the way you react reveals who you are. I shut down the laptop and got to my feet. Even though my hands were shaking, I wasn't scared. Not at all. My coat pocket's watch had stopped ticking. However I had a plan by Monday morning. Not retaliation. Not quite yet. Just guidance. Additionally, giving instructions to a woman who has been undervalued can be risky. Only in the past several months had Caleb developed the practice of leaving early for work, so. After 10 minutes of waiting and finishing my coffee, I sneaked inside my studio. Dust danced in the light beams while the wood remained warm from the early sun. The prototype table we were creating for the hotel commission was something I had hand-drawn, measured with my fingers, and purposefully curved, like the spine of an antique violin. I ran my palm over it. He referred to it as our project. However, it had always belonged to me. I took out a locked folder that I hadn't opened in 2 years from the back cabinet, which is where I stored the original designs, the LLC papers, the copyrights to our early designs, and the email trail from our first licensing agreement were among the documents I had stored for emergencies. Nearly all of it was in our names. Nearly, the foundation of the Larch and Pine collection. The first 5 pieces was registered under my name alone. Before I even said yes, I had submitted the paperwork the evening Caleb proposed. At the time, it seemed absurd. Be cautious, I recall feeling bad, like though anticipating betrayal was the same as preparing for it. I was grateful for that tiny glimmer of vision. Now I went to see Elise downtown that afternoon. Since we were 2 broke design students eating peanut butter off plastic spoons at 2 in the morning during our undergraduate years. Elise Barrett and I had been friends. Life, marriages, the normal drift, we wandered throughout the years. However, I had never forgotten that she went on to practice corporate law. A very good one. Her workplace was slick, monochromatic, and filled with literature that everyone respected, but no one read. She didn't say hi when she saw me. She simply got to her feet and spread her arms wide. Something in my chest unknotted, but I didn't cry. She urged me to speak, so I did everything. The wine, the lipstick, the buyout document drafts. The supplier makes the payment, the fees for consultation. As I spoke, I noticed her becoming still. She rewrote entire contract provisions with a single well-placed comma, and her eyes sharpened in a way that reminded me of who she was. When I eventually quit talking, she remarked, "You have more leverage than you think." Really, more than you realize. I gave her a flash drive that included all of the copies I had made. She said she would do a silent review, no alerts or flags, just lawful shadow labor that is silent. She drew me into another hug before I left. She said, "Don't let them fool you into reacting. They take over the narrative as soon as you respond. Keep quiet, remain calm. You're just waiting for the clock to catch up. You have won." I reached through my coat and felt the pocket watch. It failed to tick. It still mattered. Though I got home late that night. Caleb was already asleep, or at least feigning it. I remained silent. I didn't inquire about his day or give him a forehead kiss. I simply listened to the breeze through the pines while sitting on a blanket on the porch. I allowed myself to recall the first time we were there before the foundation was poured, envisioning the layout of the kitchen and the location of the fireplace. "That will be our corner, your reading chair, my guitar," he added, pointing to a spot of ground. It had been years since he had played that instrument. I had no idea where it was. The days that followed were hazy and filled with mechanical accuracy. At meetings, I grinned. I gave my approval to the designs. Even Olivia's casual joke during a lecture made me laugh. However, I was always building. I had a private meeting with 2 of our original investors, people who had faith in me before we had fancy espresso cups and showroom lighting. I posed straightforward questions to them. Would Caleb and Olivia continue investing if they went on without me? The responses were unimpressive. Simply firm, "No. The facade of the brand disintegrates without your name." I expressed my gratitude to them, didn't take any notes. Elise, however, did. She submitted an official intellectual property audit in my name, which is currently anonymous. She could make paper appear to be smoke. Until your lungs burned, you wouldn't be aware that you were marked. Olivia asked me out for drinks on Thursday. Her voice was sweet with performance as she remarked, "We haven't caught up in forever." "You have been extremely busy lately?" Yes, I said, why not? Ironically, I helped popularize the style of rooftop bars with reclaimed wood tabletops and Edison lighting, which is where we first met downtown. She talked too much with her hands and wore a silky lavender dress. Like a damaged antique chair, she was barely maintaining her weight when I viewed her. How is Caleb's situation? During the martini, she inquired. I grinned. Stable. Her nod was too quick. That's excellent. He appears to be concentrated recently. I took a taste of my wine. All right. Routine has always been important to us. She looked at me for a while. You know, she continued softly, I'd be in favor of you taking a break from the daily grind at any time. You've created a stunning creation. Perhaps a little rest is in order. It was there. The initial gentle push, the offer to sit down before being pushed out, was warm and poisoned. I leaned closer. You're correct, it's lovely. However, I still haven't completed engraving my initials on it. Bewildered, she blinked. I didn't go into detail. After returning home, I wound my pocket watch and fell asleep for the first time in months. Because Caleb and Olivia would never comprehend what they didn't know. Which is that you don't force a craftswoman to abandon her product. She still knows where the beams are, but you forget that where the hinges are attached, where there is a creaking floor. She also understands how to destroy it all, or rebuild it from the ground up. It was 2 weeks before any official action was taken. However, the ground was already changing beneath the surface. Silent, methodical, and unavoidable, Elise worked like winter. The foundation was already broken by the roots when Caleb discovered it. Our brand licensing partner gave us a call first. With his phone in hand, as if it had betrayed him, Caleb barged into the kitchen. Why would Levinson and Morse put a hold on paying royalties? He insisted I raised my head from my tea. Did they explain why? They mentioned a conflict involving intellectual property. I blinked. Unusual. Perhaps ask legal. He looked at me for a moment, trying to find a clue. A break. I gave him nothing. He departed the room in a daze of entitlement and bewilderment. Later that evening, I sent Elise the email I knew would follow, in which Olivia made a last-ditch effort to inquire as to whether I had accidentally triggered any out-of-date copyright charm, and plausible deniability surrounded it. I didn't answer because emails were no longer the only thing involved. Elise had submitted a motion to halt any asset transfers made by the corporation while a dispute review was conducted. Keep quiet lawful, not a single headline. Additionally, she subpoenaed metadata from the firm's design software, which confirmed what we already knew. Olivia's reported legacy phase was a simple copy and paste job from my original concept board, which was created 4 years prior. The rights belonged to me. But ownership wasn't all I sought. I desired lucidity. So I gave Jonah Hammond a call. When we still sanded every prototype by hand, Jonah was our shop floor manager. He had left amicably 2 years prior to launch a little cabinetry company. However, he had once brought up some strange things about Caleb, such as some anomalies in his invoices and small-scale design thefts. I had written it off at the moment. Caleb was defended. I felt bad about that. Jonah didn't seem shocked when he picked up. He remarked, "This is what I've been waiting for." The following day, we met in a coffee shop off of 3rd Street. The barista recalled my name, but the mugs were chipped. Jonah had a folder with him, like a sacrifice for peace. He spread it out on the table between us. Caleb had been secretly selling simplified versions of our ideas to low-cost fabricators under a shell brand, as evidenced by the emails, screenshots, and letter from an overseas fabricator that were found within. You were unaware, Jonah inquired. No, I muttered, but I do now. I wound the pocket watch once again when I came home that evening. The truth is only a click away. One for timing, and a special one for the women who came before me who never accepted anything less than their full name for the things they fought so hard for. Arbitration was proposed by Elise. She remarked, "It keeps it quiet. No media, only pressure on a Tuesday morning." Caleb got the letter at work. That evening he did not return home. Olivia did to the showroom, not to my residence. I was there to discuss the fall exhibit with our visual designer. As if we were still pals, Olivia entered without knocking and carried a box of pastries. She had a fragile smile. "Can we have a conversation?" I dismissed the designer. In the beginning, we would sit on the velvet bench by the rear window and sketch layout ideas. She started by saying, You're hurting Caleb. I arched an eyebrow. It's a clever way to describe theft. It isn't theft, it's simply, you had lost your interest. You were at the studio all the time and Caleb selected you. I stated bluntly. Indeed I know. She clenched her jaw. There is no need for this to go nuclear. It nearly made me chuckle. I answered, I'm not the one holding the match, but the deed is in my possession. Olivia went pale. I leaned a little forward. You believed me to be merely the craftsman, the sentimental one I signed the contracts to. In case you forgot, I also read them. There was silence between us. She left the pastries behind as she got up to go. On my way out, I handed them to the cleaner. 3 days later, Elise and I were seated at a mediation table across from Caleb and his attorney. He appeared worn out. I merely irritated, not regretful or shattered. Let's act like grown-ups, he said. It's not personal. I got my folder open. One page was deleted. I passed it across the table and said, this is the original sketch of the Archer chair, filed in my name in 2016. Without revealing royalties, you sold 3,200 of them to other distributors. That is a breach. His attorney shifted uneasily. Elise included a second sheet with an email that Olivia, posing as me, sent to a customer. She declared, this is fraud. I put it on top and said, and the draft share dilution plan, drafted without the board's consent. One more breach. Caleb gave his face a rub. This can be fixed. He stated, all we have to do is recalculate ownership. Then I grinned, not with resentment. Not in a mean way, simply put neatly, we don't exist. Caleb said I was already cut off by you. I only need to finish the paperwork. I presented two choices. The first option is for him to step down, sign his share, and walk away with a small buyout. My second option is to go public, not in a dramatic way with facts, the inexpensive outsourcing, the brand of shell. The contracts were broken, the phony registrations of designs. Additionally, the time frame of his affair with Olivia would not appear well next to advertising campaigns promoting craftsmanship and trust, even though it is not illegal. He went with choice number one. There was nothing he could do. I watched his hands as he signed stable. I'm still certain. However, I saw that he was not wearing the watch that I had given him for our 5th anniversary, because he had lost both when he pawned time for money. I didn't throw a party on the day that I became the sole proprietor of Larch and Pine. I walked around the deserted showroom feeling every polished contour and edge. I then reopened my first toolbox in the small workshop in the back, the same one I used to construct our first chair. The pocket watch was at the bottom, still wrapped in the flannel I had used for padding. I wound it 3 times. Additionally, let it tick loudly. I allowed it to keep time once more for the first time in years. Since I was no longer frozen, I was on my way. I was alone myself, barefoot and surrounded by light, as I stood under the new studio's skylight 6 months after the arbitration. The original structure was completely destroyed. I retained the essential elements, exposed beams, brick walls, and the pervasive smell of linseed oil and cedar. But for the first time, everything else was mine, really mine. No signatures were shared, no quiet concessions, my fingerprints, and no one else's. The name Larch and Pine remained the same, but our clientele now associated it with a silent asterisk, a nod of acknowledgement, a hush of survival and reclamation. Press releases on the buyout were not issued by us. In trade publications, we didn't fire shots. We let the art do the talking, and it did. Chairs one by one. I also kept my private life private, softly but not drastically. Caleb disappeared. A gossip here, a LinkedIn update there. He reportedly relocated to Minneapolis. Another person claimed that he accepted a consultant position with a chain of stores. Weeks after everything had calmed down, he wrote a single email with the subject line, "No hard feelings." I didn't respond, not because I was upset, so nothing more could be said. I heard Olivia had moved out of town. Her name vanished from any area pertaining to design. I'll never know if she folded in on herself or recreated herself somewhere else. I have no interest. Not all closures are events. There are moments when it's just a quiet that no longer hurts. One afternoon in November, Jonah, the former store manager who contributed to the revelation, came to visit. He brought his bashful, sketch-loving adolescent daughter. She has the eye. He declared with pride, just as you did. Before he even asked, I gave her an internship. That's because leaving tools to the next person who is ready, rather than hoarding power, is how legacies are created. I took a seat in the back corner of the new studio that night, the one with the workbench facing east and the lone window. I took the pocket watch out once more. Months had passed since I had last wound it. I hadn't forgotten, though I wouldn't. I made 3 rotations of the crown. Click, click, click. I then placed it next to a partially sanded armrest on the table. I didn't need it to keep track of time for myself. For once I was exactly where I should have been. Elise persuaded me to apply for a local grant for women-led creative companies that winter, using a lot of wine and her trademark strategic perseverance. Instead of submitting a conventional proposal, I sent in an essay on design philosophy. Things that still tick is what I dubbed it. I wrote about dignity, workmanship, and inheritance, not of material possessions, but of bravery. I kept names to myself. However I did speak the truth, I prevailed. It wasn't money that could change your life. Visibility was a better option. A stage, a request to give a speech at an artists' conference in the spring, I nearly declined. However, the night before the confirmation deadline, I found myself holding the pocket watch once more and following the shallow groove in my grandmother's apron, where the brass had worn over the years. She had no TED presentations, grants, or platforms. She was callous. Her grit was quiet. Silence was not all I owed her. I replied, yes. I donned a basic black dress and boots that I could walk kilometers in on the day of the symposium. I didn't have any notes with me, only my coat's pocket watch. I told them about hands and chairs, about rebuilding after betrayal, and about how treachery tries to make you feel unworthy of your own legacy. After that, I stated something I hadn't practiced. There is a form of justice that is silent. It simply shows up. When you start making things that cannot be stolen and cease requesting what was taken. A young woman then came up to me. She was shaking her hands. She claimed that because her lover had told her that her style wasn't marketable, she had been secretly creating furniture in her garage and was scared to tell anyone. She requested permission to show me a picture of her work. Yes, I replied. She sobbed. I gave her a hug. Suddenly I realized what healing looks like after it's finished blossoming. Not too loud, not victorious, simply put, giving. I had a cup of tea and felt the weight of serenity gently pushing into my chest as I sat by my window that evening. There was silence in the house. The studio was shut down. Outside, the city was vibrant and dark. Once again, I unclasped the watch. Make a tick, make a tick, make a tick. It continued to function. I was 2. Please subscribe and leave a comment below. If you liked this tale of quiet justice and personal rejuvenation, when did you regain control of your life? Others can find their voice by listening to yours.